Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to The Mouse Says the Butler Didn't Do It. This is the second story in our podcast, and it's a little different. It is called Escape to a New Hope. In doing this story, it follows and runs along coinciding with a New Hope Thanksgiving. You will meet several characters that were part of the first story. However, this story takes place in the start of October during the Ukraine War and in Ukraine. As I grew up with my grandparents being both Polish and Prussian, not Russian, not German, Prussian, my dialect in speaking some of the names will be different. And when I come across a name that has a valid significance to the story and is a real-life part of history, if I do not pronounce that name correctly, as I know I will probably muck it up, I will then attempt to spell that name so that you may look into that person in particular, and in doing so, find out the true background, as several people in this story are actual historical reference in the modern day. When we begin this story, the young soldier involved is Russian, and he does not like what has become with this war. He's never even believed in it. So, welcome to the world of Dima as we start Escape to a New Hope. Chapter 1. The air was chilled as the icy winds bit into his uniform's thin jacket. It was -1 degree Celsius with winds blowing at over 64 kilometers per hour, bringing the wind chill down to -12. At 29 degrees Fahrenheit, it had been the wind chill that had bitten into them. A wind of 40 miles per hour dropped the temperature as it was still dropping to below 10 degrees, and they were soaked to the skin with the pouring autumn rain of the storm that had rushed over the Ukrainian mountaintop, and they were now pinned in the small destroyed village with no known way of getting reserves or of an infrastructure of supplies. It had been 2 days without water, and their IRPs had run out 5 days past. No supplies were getting past the Ukrainian forces. In his own way, Dima was proud of these peoples, who were part of his own ancestry on his grandmother's side. Several of Dima Mikhailovich Vingrodov's comrades had found some unpicked apples in what remained of an orchard from an abandoned farm on the outskirts of a small mountain range village of a distance from Komshuvaka, Komshuvakah. The smaller village was named Kromaheva, on the eastern front of war-torn Ukraine. Back home in St. Petersburg, he was a student teacher of elementary, or what would be called in Russia, primary school children. He had been drafted into this hell. Dima did not believe in this war. Why should Putin take people's lands because he had screwed up and couldn't provide for his own country's men and women? And he was a dictator without a doubt, in the guise of a world leader, and he sucked at that. along with being a liar to his people, and if you stated that, you were imprisoned or gone, meaning 6 foot under. His grandfather, had been a Soviet soldier in the Red Army when Mikhail Gorbachev was the leader of the USSR. He was so proud when his world leader dismantled the world of Lenin Brezhnev, Nikita Khrushchev, and Joseph Stalin, along with Vladimir Lenin. Dead Boris's own father had fought the Nazi atrocity on the Western Front of the Soviet Union in the harsh, biting cold of winter, only to come home to a communist dictatorship and a paranoid leader, and that of Uncle Joseph Stalin. Dima himself lived with the reincarnation of Stalin's madness as a president and a wanted man, as the worldwide arrest warrant was now issued and would stand by the World Court for Vladimir Putin for war crimes. Dima's grandfather and grandmother, Boris and Sylvia, had raised him until he was 2, when first she passed of cancer, and then his grandfather of what he was told was a heart attack. But no, he did not believe it was from that. Boris had left him with words when, at just shy of 3 years, he found his grandfather down on the floor of their apartment. The man was reaching for a box. Prinesky, min, Dima. He'd remembered his grandfather's last words. Bring me, Dima. When he did, he dialed their landline to call for help. Boris had pushed the box into the boy's arms and died on the floor as they waited for help that never arrived. His father, Levya, had died on the streets of St. Petersburg in a hail of bullets as an undercover attaché attached to the police department. His orders were to infiltrate the Russian mob. Levya had succeeded in doing that, and yet he died a hero as he severed what was thought to be the head of the serpent before his own murder that fateful day. Dima was a month away from being born when it had happened. He had seen a plaque for his father in the park. He carried a photo in his small albums. The plaque was surrounded by candles, and people left bouquets of flowers and small pebbles in his remembrance. The date on the plaque stated January 22nd, 23 years prior. His mother, Victoria, left him with his paternal grandparents less than a month after his birth. He never saw her again after the photo taken on March 20th of that year. I had photos of my father, of dead, of Bubby, but none of them as grainy school photos as Victoria's, and the ones at that party, they seemed to depict her as different than what I was told. They are gone now, lost here in Ukraine. He laid his AK-12 assault rifle against a stone wall and squatted down to try to shield himself from the blowing winds in mid-autumn. His ammo case had less than 50 rounds. It was the 3rd week in October. The leaves of the Ukrainian villages, towns, and cities were starting to turn colors: yellow, orange, red, some brown. But with the chilling rain, it would take the rest of them down to the ground. He saw this as a foreboding situation of things yet to come, and he hoped he didn't die as part of it. Those that had not been torn from the branches by bullets or mortars, or by the nature's heavy rains, were clinging in desperation to the blown-apart trees and shrubs, like that of the tree where he had to leave Peter, one of his best friends. This land was, at one time, a picturesque countryside mountain village of small homesteads, farmlands, orchards, and a beautiful town square with a church and a synagogue. It had been peaceful. That was until Putin. Now, though, since Putin had declared his war and sent invaders, as he himself was, and wished he was not, the fields that should have been ready for the harvest lay desolate, dead, or abandoned. Some of these fields, as he looked about, were desolate, having craters that if a man fell into, he would need a comrade's help to get out of, or die if left there. Why had Putin forced us into this war? These people harmed no one. For God's sake, the president, his family were Jews who survived Hitler's Holocaust. How could he call this man a leader of a Nazi regime? My father was Jewish. I am a Jew. Why? Why for he do this? What is the cause? Dima squeezed his eyes shut as his gut cramped from hunger. He tasted the blood from the cracked, parched lips as his tongue felt like sandpaper on the rough sawn board. The village of Kaimashakov had very little left to it. Krymokala even less. Bombed out farmsteads, a destroyed town square. A tiny elementary school where teachers like himself would have taught children of the future lay in ruins. The remains of an older man, the librarian, he supposed, lay in what once would have been the school's library. He'd apparently been attempting to save books, children's books, when he'd been cut down by their sardonic commander. The church lay in ruins, its steeple toppled and a hole blown in the side that you could see into the basement. The tiny synagogue was no more. It lay in a pile of rubble. What was left of the synagogue he'd entered with the respect he was taught by his grandparents, and for the honor of his bubby he had carried a candlestick and small menorah and a Seder plate with a kiddish cup he'd pulled from under the debris. His hope was to get them to a safe place of another temple and give them to a rabbi for safekeeping. He wanted so badly to open the ark and take the sacred scrolls, but there was no way to protect them within his backpack. These few pieces, too, are now gone, I would guess, lost with my pack. He thought to himself. My dad would call him an old-school communist bastard in that of my commander. Dima rubbed his chin and thought, one day this comrade, bah, not mine, Igor Kashkov, would push the wrong soldier to his limit. He closed his dark brown eyes and scrubbed his 6+ weeks' worth of growth of beard with the back of his hand. He hadn't been able to shave, much less have a shower, in over a month's time. Kashkov pushed until the Ukraine warriors pushed them back. Now they'd been backed into a small, desolate, abandoned village and were surrounded without food, water, and their ammunition was depleted. If he died here, he had no one to mourn for him back in St. Petersburg, like Peter had no one to mourn for him. He was an orphan. Their government didn't care as long as they did not have to take care of these children. At age 17, if they did not qualify for university or trade school, they were put out on the streets to fend for themselves. That would only lead to a life of drugs, alcohol, and prostitution, with an early death on the streets. That was if a Christian agency like Micaiah Ministries and Restoration House did not take the steps to search them out, find them, and give them a chance at life. They saved as many of these lost and left behind ones as they could. The ministry of Micaiah Ministries and that of the now built Restoration House were a true blessing to the street children in Russia. His MP 445 Grouch, the worst sidearm a soldier could carry in the Russian armed forces, held one clip with his remaining 10 9mm bullets. God forgive me. May my homeland be forgiven for what this madman has forced us into. Please, if you are up there and listening, have someone at the Kremlin do what is right to end this devastation and debacle he's gotten our people into. The shout of Kashkov had him inhale. Here we go again. He shook his head to bend to retrieve his weapon. Chapter 2. The shouting continued, as did several rounds of gunfire. Come on! Come on! I want this place burned to the ground! Destroy it all! They are coming! Leave nothing standing for them! The man had stood to fire at a young boy of no more than 10. The child stood in tatters of clothing. A child, boy, the age of that Dima would have taught back in St. Petersburg, as something moved in the grass by the boy's feet. Dima left his rifle and leapt over the wall. As he ran, then dove to tackle his commanding officer, he grabbed the man by the shoulders to tumble over several times and come to his feet and yank the rifle from the man's hands. The blow he struck Kashkov with drove the man backward by a foot. What are you doing? He is child, you bastard! Dima smelt the alcohol. Where, he thought, he gets this from? Everything slowed in its motions. It seemed as if he was part of a film strip, in a frame by frame of an old movie. Kashkov's hand went to his holster. Then the Grouch was being taken out. His eyes became unrecognizable. They widened like those of a short zombie films Dima had seen with his friends and didn't like. Kashkov aimed. A psychotic glint in his eyes above the demonic evil smile was plastered on his face. Then the ringing like a bell in the toll for the dead. A repeated explosion of sound in his ears, followed by the impact that drove the young teacher, drafted as a soldier, backwards. Dima staggered, and finally he slammed into a bombed-out vehicle of some type. His legs gave out, and he dropped to his knees. The bullets had hit Dima square. His left shoulder had spun him slightly. The wound to his right side of his chest pushed him back, almost bending him in half. The pain in his lower abdomen bent him forward. Finally, the one that ended it was to his right hip, and he dropped to the ground. As he staggered with the impact of each shot, he stared into the blazing eyes of the former KGB man. a man who bragged of his friendship of their president and how he joined the military by buying his way in from his old and outstart Communist Party relationships. Die, lieber Vegodovskov, he stammered and stuttered with his drunkenness. The gun shot to the head rocked Dima. Dima had dropped to his knees as he bounced off the wreckage to stare into those cold, unfeeling eyes. His head snapped to one side as the bullet tore through the helmet and had slipped at an angle and partially obscured his vision. His sight blurred as his eyes rolled to leave him only to see the burning white-hot light. He rocked back on his knees, then fell forward onto his face and laid there, unmoving. He inhaled the scent of leaves and grass and the deep smell of the moist, rich soil of Ukraine, the breadbasket of the world. He was going to die here on foreign soil at the hand of a crazed, drunken, commanding officer who thought him to be his long-ago deceased father. His eyes drifted closed as he felt the depletion of warmth and the deepening of cold in that of his body. Multiple gunshots rang out. They echoed throughout what was left of the small, once peaceful village. Not 2 or 3, but too many to count. His last thought was, are they following this madman's orders? A quiet shuffle, a ripping sound. The thud of footfalls followed, then a low rumble of departing vehicles. Silence, followed by nothing but blackness. He was left to die like Peter had been, cold and alone in a land of people he thought were so beautiful, strong, and defiant. His final slow of words were, "May God bless these peoples." Yet Dima could smell smoke as a fire was starting nearby. Then there was nothing, and that was as his brain shut down. Chapter 3. The young soldier's brain came slowly back online as he started to feel things happening with his body. He had pain in his right hip and left shoulder, but he could live with it. It was no more than when he was 12 at the orphanage. He had bit into a piece of chocolate that was a gift for Christmas from a man and woman of the Christian house of the preachers. It had laid on a cavity he was too afraid to see a dentist about to have filled. Not that their dentistry was very good in the orphanages of Russia. He smiled at that thought. If I am remembering that, then I am not dead yet. Da? Da, a sweet voice answered in an odd accented like Russian, but was interspersed with that of Ukrainian. Yes, you are alive. Do you speak English? English is better for me than the Russian. Dima opened his eyes and turned his head on his stiff neck. He did this as he followed the voice and looked at the young lady. She was beautiful. As he focused, he could make out her very long blonde hair. She had deep blue eyes, full lips, and her smile gave him a view of the full face with rosy cheeks. There was a smudge of ash or dirt on her cheek, and from what he could see of the ripped jeans and baggy sweater, they hid the curves of a full figure of a blossoming young woman. Da, he shook his head. I mean, yes, I can speak to you in English. He blinked several times. Good. She smiled with a shy grin. How do you feel? Little pain, very hungry. I feel dried out, like an Egyptian mummy. She came over with a dented pitcher and a chipped cup. The woman knelt and then poured water into the cup. Can you try to sit up? Yes. He struggled to sit, but made it. She helped him to slide back against a rough wall. He then realized he wasn't in a bed, but on a pile of blankets and sheets and towels. These that he'd laid upon were laid out on the floor of what looked to be a bombed-out basement of some type of a large building. The young woman placed her hand on his shoulder to lean forward and held the cup to his lips. Easy, you will choke. He guzzled. The water had an odd taste, but it was cool and oh so good to the parched body. She poured another cup. Slowly, there is plenty. It is rainwater. He drank the second cup and held her hand to steady it. The fourth cup finally quenched his thirst. He then heard the cry of a young baby, an infant, possibly that of a newborn. I will be back. I leave this here for you to drink. She stood and turned to step away. What is your name, please? Anastasia Bohadin Bilik. Annie for short. And your name is? She picked up the baby to lift the side of her sweater. The baby, wrapped in a torn old blanket, nuzzled her breast and latched on. Dmitri Mikhailovich Vigoroslev, Dima. They call me Dima. I am 23. You are its mother? He nodded to the babe. She smiled. Yes, she is mine. Her name is Tatiana. She came over to sit on the floor. Where is your husband? I'm sorry, I mean not... Annie took a breath. I have no husband. She is bastard. The man is dead, she growled. She shrugged at the look on his face. Was he like me? A Russian soldier? Soldier, yes. Russian, yes. Like you? No, not like you, Dima. She looked up at the sound of cinders tumbling down into the entrance of wherever she hid them. Annie, it's us. A girl's voice was a mere whisper. He is awake. No fear, she called back. Two children appeared. The boy was who Kashkov shot at. He is not harmed. You saved his life. My sister, Ivana Limba. She will be 13 next month. And Denis Igaks. Not for you, he no see his 11th birthday. Come say hello to Dima. The children came forth to set down their two small baskets and a bag. Ivana resembled her older sister. Denis had dark brown eyes and wavy black hair. Hello, Ivana smiled and offered him a pear. It's hard, not as sweet as should be. Is not fully ripe, but is good though. His mouth watered. Thank you. He took the pear and bit into it. The most incredible flavors burst into his mouth. The juices spread over his tongue in the delightful sensation. Oh, this is so delicious. Thank you. Ivana smiled. She turned to Annie. We need to move him. There are soldiers from both sides this time. They are getting close? Annie asked. Denis nodded repeatedly. There will be more gunfire and explosions in buildings. This place is no safe anymore. Ivana shook her head. Get the things you are to bring. Annie turned to Dima as the children rose to gather their items. You need to be able to walk. It is not far, and you are not who you think you are. You are Dim Billick, she emphasized. Our cousin. You are 18. You do not speak because you were born mute. I have your birth certificate and your medical records to prove you are a mute. This is why you are not in service of Ukraine. You have no way to communicate, no voice. She placed her hand to his throat. You do not shave until I say, please. They find you Russian, either side, because of what was done. It will not end well for you. Not for us either, for helping you. You saved Dennis's life. We will save yours. She rose to look down at him. Dima gave a single nod and did not say a word. He pulled back the cover to find his chest was heavily bandaged, and he had dried blood in places. The uniform was gone. In its place were a baggy pair of sweatpants with a hole in the knee and a grayed pair of white socks. I have no shoes for you. We'll have to find. She handed him a T-shirt and a hoodie with a ripped pocket. Dima dressed quickly and was on his feet with only some difficulty, but was rolling the blankets. Annie touched him on the back. Come. The two children were at the entrance. He picked up the roll and looked about as they started out. Dima noticed a guitar with 5 of its 6 strings intact. He picked it up to put it over his shoulder by the sling. As they walked into the setting of the sun and the light drizzle, she looked at him. The guitar. Why, you... He showed her by movement of his hand. You play, she smiled. He gave a nod. She looked around the area of bombed-out buildings in the center of the village to hoist a large bundle on her shoulder. Behind her, she drug a battered 3-wheel wagon with several beat-up boxes and multiple torn clothes bags tied down to it. The babe she had tightly wrapped in a sheet over her shoulder, as if in a swaddled sling. Both the children carried ripped and torn bags. They each carried several, as well as a few covered baskets that seemed to have the smell of something like dried fruit emanating from them. Dima himself had grabbed a leftover bag and stuffed several empty bottles in it and multiple cloths. He could make water filters from the cloths, and if they boiled, steamed, or dealt with the water properly from river water and filtered it along with what rainwater they could catch, they would have a supply. As they at least would have drinking water. This way, follow them. We go past the school. You will see. Annie struggled to speak. Chapter 4. They walked through the rubble of the streets. As they approached the school, Annie watched the children glance towards the burned-out library. What is it? She asked, as they moved on quickly. Dennis shook his head. Ivana gave a tiny whisper. Annie looked at Dima with a raised brow as she increased her pace for him to follow. He struggled, but kept up as he only carried the guitar slung over his back and the bag with the bottles, along with the bedroll that banged off of his hip where he had tied it off to. With a second ravaged cloth bag, as they stopped to check the outside of the basement they had been leaving, he had tossed the few candles, tapers, and what seemed to be a brass serving tray for small Shabbat wine glasses. Within his reach, he had grabbed a silver platter he thought may be used for the challah during the service. There were several candlesticks, along with a box of matches he'd managed to lay his hands on. They seemed special to this family, but they were willing to leave them in order to get them and himself out. Dima couldn't do that. He gathered what he could for them in those few seconds of scrambling and getting out of the building. Within the other torn bag, the glass bottles rattled, even as they were amongst the cloth. They turned down one street, jogging as they went. Then an alley was gained. Annie stopped with him to take a few breaths. "Are you all right?" Dima gave a nod and motioned onward. The next block they turned and cut through several backyards. Another alley was where Dima went to his knees. Annie spun with Ivana. The youngest sister ran to his side to help Annie with him. He was struggling to get to his feet. "Leave me," he ordered. "Niet!" The two stated, one in a whisper, the other in a harsh growl in his ear. Dennis kept a watch for any movement as the two women helped Dima. "Breathe slowly," Annie told him. "It's too much for him. What has he been carrying?" Dima looked in the bags. Ivina looked in the bags. "What is it?" Dima motioned with a hand to his heart, then to them, and whispered, "I know steel is precious to you. You need to have." Gasping, he tried to push himself to his feet. "Is Mama and Grandmama's silver items. He's weighted himself down to save these for us." Ivina wiped a tear. "Damn fool!" Annie shook her head as she looked about. They were wasting time. She looked around as she felt they were there for what she thought was too long. Dennis's head came up. The boy pointed and gestured. "I know we must go. Put the bag on the wagon." Annie pulled Dima to his feet. The children put the bag into place and tied it to another bundle. Ivana pulled the band from her head to tie it to the others to secure it. They were up and moving again, this time a bit slower, but moving. Dima caught a glint of something or someone in movement in a building. He grabbed Annie's arm and yanked her back. They stood in the shadow of a burned-out shop. He'd managed to stop them in time. This was just a Russian soldier who came out and started down the block. He sang a Russian bar song and staggered as he opened a bottle of something. The man tossed the cap to one side and moved the bottle to his other hand to place the former within reach of his hand's weapon. He chucked and put the bottle to his lips. Dima mouthed, "Looting." Annie nodded as they took to the street once more. Another street and into the backyard of a burned-out business, where he noticed 3 hand-dug graves with flowers that laid on them. "Quickly, in here." Annie passed Tatiana to Ivana from the sling and pulled the garage door open. Dennis took hold of the door handle and tugged to the other side. They shoved the battered straw and hay bales out of the way and off to the side. Annie worked fast, putting things into the Zev 110505. Trivia. Her grandfather had specially ordered many years ago, with sliding front doors, a walkway passage into the rear, and heavy-duty suspension. The truck was old, but built like a tank. She motioned for him. Dima climbed in to set things down and turned to help Ivana with the baby, and then Dennis. He picked up a baseball bat to look at the boy. Dennis simply shrugged. "You ride in front seat. Do you drive?" Annie asked. Dima moved the bat up front. He sat in the passenger seat of the '79 factory delivery converted pickup to van and repeatedly nodded. "Good. You can do some of the driving if we make it out of here and through the bombed-out areas. In meantime, pray." Annie took the keys from the sun visor to start the truck, then put it in first and crept forward out of the garage into the yard to leave the wagon behind. As they rolled past the grave, Ivana wiped a tear. Dennis placed his hand out to give a silent wave of goodbye. With a deep breath, Annie turned left to drive along the alley. She started to speak to have Ivana join in the Kaddish, the Jewish mourner's prayer. Dima, being told he was mute, mouthed the second of the prayers that they had spoken, a prayer he heard from his grandparents on waking and before he slept. Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Lehad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Amen. She spoke, her eyes on the road. He looked over at her. Annie's brows were raised to high beneath her blonde bangs, and they couldn't be seen. "What?" he mouthed. "You are Jewish?" Annie glanced at him. Dima swung back to concentrate. Then she swung back to concentrate on driving over the rubble in the road for several blocks. Dima bowed his head. Chapter 5. As she turned the corner onto what once was the main street of the road, into the outer part of the village, that was when he saw the Russian soldier approach with his gun raised. Dima nodded his head over and over again. "Yes, I am Jewish." Annie shifted into fourth gear. "Do not say a word. He shook his head and motioned with his hand to go, go, go. Ivana shouted, "Drive, Annie, now!" She gave a curt nod. The girl came forward to slam her battered, hole-filled shoe with the toe sticking out of it on what was barely left of the battered sandal her sister wore. The truck lurched forward as Dennis, supporting Ivana, was keeping her balance. Dima picked up the bat. Annie stood on the gas as Ivana almost crushed her foot to push in the clutch. Ivana grabbed onto the gear shift to cover Annie's hand. Together, they shifted into fifth gear, and they continued to pick up speed as they accelerated. "Net, net, net!" the soldier shouted as he leveled the rifle. Dima threw the sliding door back to stand on the running board and leaned out as his left hand wrapped in the grab strap to give him leverage. In his right, he held the bat that Dennis had stowed away. He swung the bat as hard as his weakened body would allow him. Like that of a golfer or a cricket player, he brought it up, but at a side-armed manner, angled at the perfect height, only within his right hand. The rifle, mostly made of plastic, blew out of the man's hands as it shattered into fragmented pieces. Dima swung the bat a second time in a backhand strike to catch part of the helmet and the soldier in the side of the face with a resounding but sickening crack and a crunch that left the former Russian soldier feeling queasy to his stomach. The man went down like he'd been shot. Dima knew he'd shattered the guy's jaw and more than likely fractured his skull. The vibration of the impact resonated up Dima's right arm, into his shoulder, and across the wound to the right of his chest as it slammed into the wounded left shoulder where he held onto the grab strap. Squeezing his eyes shut, he swayed. He would have fallen from the truck had he not felt the arms of a child. Dennis grabbed the back of Dima's hoodie to yank him back into the truck and threw the seatbelt over his shoulder. Ivana untangled his wrist from the grab strap. Dima had sat down hard, but changed the bat from his right to his left hand once free of the strap. Dennis clambered around and over him to reach out to grab the other strap on the door and slam it shut. Dima folded in on himself from the pain that had caused his chest to feel like an A-bomb just went off there. Dennis pulled his hero onto his chest to support him and held on as he leaned against the dashboard. "Are you nuts?" Annie shouted. "Oh, shit!" She saw the other Russian soldier explode from the corner building. He dropped the bottle he had, and it exploded at his feet. Staggering, he tried to pull his sidearm. His hand hit the trigger. There was a round of rapid fire coming from the semi-automatic, but there was no ricochet. Nothing hit the van. Annie swallowed. Looking into the side mirror, she blinked as the soldier rolled, holding his leg in pain, as blood spewed from the wound and across the ground. "What the fuck?" "May I speak now?" Dima concentrated on his breathing. "Da!" "The Grotch has a bad design of trigger mechanism." "It has a hair trigger?" Ivina stated. "Da! If not watched or cleaned, it can go off when touched or grabbed." "He shot himself with his own weapon?" Annie glanced at him. Dima nodded as he sat back. She stepped harder on the pedal and glared. They were heading for a checkpoint at the edge of town. There were 2 Russian soldiers standing to the side as a cigarette smoke curled around their heads and up into the air. Dima pushed Dennis down below the dash. He reached for the bat. Ivina turned to see them. "Annie, think of Dim." She crouched and laid her body over Dima's lap to hold him in place. "For Dim." Annie accelerated and cut the wheel. The truck swung towards the 2 of them. They raised their weapons. "Annie," Dima whispered. They were on top of the checkpoint, less than 100 feet, and speeding for the 2 Russian vehicles that blocked the road. "Blaya!" Dima dropped the bat to try to cover the children. There was a scent that filled the truck, dark and spicy. Both the soldiers dove to roll out of the way. The truck clipped the curb and careened back onto the road. In Ukraine, he said what few words he could choke out through the driving pain as he gritted his teeth and shuddered. The Zaz shot between the 2 vehicles within a hair's whisker. Gunfire followed, but it sprayed the military trucks to completely miss the van. "Drive, yes!" Not all Russians follow after Putin, but we are all a bit crazy. Seems to me the Ukrainian people are a bit whacked too. She threw him a look. You are right. I am insane from this war. Christ! Ivana scrambled to get to Titan. The baby looked up at her with a smile. Ivana brought her up front. Did any of you smell that? Dennis nodded. He pointed to Dima, then to Annie. Yes, you are right. Ivana leaned on Dima's chair. Turning back with wide eyes, Annie concentrated on the bombed-out road as she hit a hole, and Ivana was thrown into Dima's lap. He threw his arms around her to keep her and the baby from slamming into Dennis, who was now pinned against the dashboard. You can speak Ukrainian? He answered her in her own tongue once more. My bubby was born in Kiev and raised there. My grandfather met her as a soldier stationed there when long before Gorbachev was our leader. He inhaled slowly. They fell in love, then married. She spoke it to me as a child. I learned. I speak Polish and German as well. French? Not so well. Italian and Spanish I can cuss in. And I have a very pretty young lady as a chauffeur and gorgeous nurse in my lap, with a beautiful baby in her arms, and a brave young man to call brother. Are you okay, Ivana? Are you no hurt after you tumble? Is Tatiana all right? Annie said in a very nasty word. Dima chuckled and winced. I am fine in my handsome Russian patient's lap. Ivana smiled. Tatiana is smiling in her basket when I bring her. Dennis, you? Dima asked. The boy nodded and pointed. He looked down at his right side of his chest and saw blood on the hoodie. You are, we are fine. You are not. Ivana started to move. Annie saw the reflection in the windshield as her sister went for the first aid box. Tatiana was laid in Annie's lap as she drove. Ivana, he is bleeding. That has not healed right yet. The girl pulled the box forward. Take off the hoodie and T-shirt. Lose it. Out the window. We have more for you. Dennis, help him, please. Dennis lifted it to get him loose and helped in the closed quarters. They did as he was told. Throwing the hoodie and the tea out the window, Dennis traded places with his sister. Ivana cut away the bandage and replaced the packing, then reapplied the gauze. Dennis handed him another shirt and sweatshirt. Thank you. Dennis nodded. Dima dressed. He looked into the boy's eyes. Dima had yet to hear the boy make a sound. He figured it was trauma-related from the war. His mind was made up. For as long as they would have him, he would use his teaching skills and his training to help this child of an ungodly war that he felt the blame for. They were now on the bombed-out road with the holes the size of craters on the moon. Annie swerved to avoid one and brought the band back into line, only to bounce them over a series of huge pockmarked holes. Cluster bombs from Russia with love, he growled. Ukraine has them too, thanks to the USA. That was all she said as they drove into the night. And there we will end our first reading of Escape to a New Hope. I hope you enjoyed this. I am glad that you joined us today, and thank you for having the time and taking the patience to listen to this story written by myself, Nico Scher, as the unpublished author in my pen name of Cheryl Ann Butler. If you like this, please press the like and subscribe. Ring the bell so that you may be notified of the next time we place Chapter 6 of this story. Thank you. Have a good day from the Mouse, Chuck, Maggie Lou, and myself.